Whisper in the pines. We shouldn't have been there. That's the most important thing I can say before I start telling this story. The maps showed an old Forest Service road, a trail that cut a good 5 miles off the hike to the lake. Zeke, the eternal optimist with his brand new, polished Toyota, jabbed a finger at the screen of his fancy GPS unit. Look, guys, right there. The fastest route. We'll get there before dark, set up camp, and crack open some beers. Dan, my younger brother, shifted nervously, eyeing the wall of dense, dark green conifers. The woods here in the New Hampshire backcountry were always thick, but this stretch looked ancient. The trees stood so close together their trunks looked like black palisades, and the light didn't seem to penetrate but to be absorbed. "Looks sketchy, Zeke," Dan muttered. But Zeke was already sliding into the driver's seat, his eyes bright with adventure. We loaded our packs, piled into the SUV. Me, Jack, in the passenger seat, Dan in the back. In that moment, I just felt mild annoyance. I'm 30, an experienced hunter. I've trekked these woods for years. I knew old map roads sometimes led nowhere, but the worst that could happen was turning around and adding a few miles. How wrong I was. At first, the road was just bad, rutted, overgrown. Then it narrowed to a track, branches whipping and screeching against the windows and roof. The GPS froze, showing only a spinning compass icon. "Glitching," Zeke snorted, tapping the dashboard. We pressed on. The air inside grew heavy, stale, smelling not of pine but of rotten, damp earth and something else. Sweet and musty, like an old root cellar. That's when we heard the first whisper. Not from outside, inside the car. Right by my ear, a cold, damp exhale and a faint, "You turn back." I jerked around. Dan was staring out his window, pale. "Did you say something?" I asked. He shook his head, not looking away from the forest. Zeke laughed nervously. "What, Jack, seeing ghosts now?" But a minute later, he slammed on the brakes himself. "What the hell?" We were staring at a massive, fallen cedar blocking the road completely. It hadn't been visible around the bend. No way around. A steep, mossy slope on one side, a bubbling black mire on the other. None of us wanted to get out, but there were no options. "All right, scouts," Zeke grumbled, swinging his door open. "We camp here, figure it out in the morning." We unloaded. The silence was absolute, oppressive. No birds, no insects, just our footsteps crunching on deadfall, a sound that felt obscenely loud. We started pitching the tent, and the whisper returned. Now it came from everywhere behind trees, under the earth, hissing in the branches. It wasn't quite words, but it carried a tone. Mockery, invitation, threat. Dan broke first. He fumbled the tent stakes, his hands shaking. "Do you hear that? God, you hear it, right? It's saying we're stuck here." Zeke snapped. "Get a grip, Dan, it's the wind in the canopy." But Zeke's face was tight, his eyes darting. I heard no wind. The air was still, dead. When full dark fell, it got worse. The forest came alive with shadows. They moved at the edge of vision, flitting between trunks, freezing when you turned your head. The whispers gained voices. Sometimes it was my dead mother's voice calling me home from a clearing to the left. Sometimes the grunt of a boar that made my blood freeze from the right. I'm a hunter. I know wood sounds. This was not that. This was wrong. This was deliberate. We zipped ourselves into the tent, but it didn't help. The fabric of the tent wall bulged inward, as if someone leaned their back against it, and a slow, deliberate scraping started, like long nails being dragged down the nylon. Zeke grabbed a flashlight and burst outside, yelling, "The hell with this! Who's out there?" I followed. Nothing. Just our dead fire and the black wall of trees watching us with 1,000 knotted eyes. And then I saw all the trees around our clearing. They stood differently. Not as they had in daylight. Their silhouettes had shifted. They were closer. The real torture of perception began. I went to gather more firewood, walked 20 paces, and the camp vanished. In its place was an old, half-collapsed shack with a dark door gap. From that gap wafted the same sweet, rotten smell. I heard Zeke's voice behind me. "Jack, over here," spun around, and there was only thicket. When I finally found the camp, it just materialized in front of me as if placed there. Dan was packing like a trapped animal. He was here. I saw his face in the tent window, long, pale like birch bark, and eyes like pitch. Zeke sat silently, gripping his folding knife. His faith in the rational was crumbling. The climax came deep in the night. The whispers became clear. It spoke in my head with Zeke's voice. "Dan stole your knife. He hid it. He wants to stay here alone. He made a deal with the woods. He's leading us to die." And into Dan's ear, as I pieced together later, it whispered with my voice, "Zeke's going to take the truck and leave. He'll leave us here. He's starting the engine now." We didn't speak of it. We just watched each other, and in our eyes, the seed of an implanted, alien terror grew. Dan snapped first. When Zeke stood up to relieve himself, Dan screamed, "Where?" For a weapon. Zeke turned, his face twisted into a foreign, animalistic grimace. This wasn't my friend. It was a grotesque parody of him. "You're hiding something, you bastard," Zeke roared, but it wasn't his voice, too raspy, too ancient. Dan lunged at him. I rushed to break it up, but in that moment the forest itself stirred. The trees leaned in, their branches reaching like arms. I saw him, standing back, blending with the trunk of a huge pine. Tall, impossibly gaunt, his body seemed woven from roots and bare branches. The face, there was no face, just hollows where eyes should be, and a long slit from which the whispering issued. The whisperer of the White Mountains. A forest spirit I'd heard in old trappers' tales but dismissed as campfire stories. A spirit that hates outsiders, that leads travelers deep so they never leave. I screamed, but it was too late. Zeke, shoving Dan off, took a step back. There was a crunch, a short, wet sound, and he was gone, simply swallowed by the earth. Where a mossy hummock had been a second before, a black hole gaped and then sealed itself shut like a mouth. Dan froze, staring at the spot. His scream died in his throat. Then he looked at me, and in his eyes I didn't see my brother, but the same wild, cornered animal. You pushed him," he whispered, his voice devoid of anything human. He turned and ran, not toward camp, but deeper into the woods, into the deepest blackness, toward that silhouette by the pine, which now beckoned with a smooth, unnatural motion. I was alone. I called for him until my voice was raw, until my throat tore from screaming. The forest answered only with whispers that now sounded like laughter. I found my truck the next morning. It was parked on that same road, barely 100 yards from the paved highway. There was no fallen tree, no mire, just the fresh imprints of our tent on the ground, and nothing else. I survived, but sometimes, especially in the quiet before dawn, I hear the whisper. It's not outside, it's in my head, and it speaks with Dan's voice. "Why did you leave us, Jack? Why didn't you save us?" And sometimes, looking at the old woods outside my window, I see the trees shift just slightly, almost imperceptibly. And I know the whisperer is satisfied. He took more than their bodies. He took a piece of me. He took my piece. And he's waiting for me to decide to go back, to look for them. It's his forest, and he's in no hurry.